We are representing the 11 people who went to Nairobi in November to visit the Life4Kids home, and we're going to tell you about our experience tonight. I, first of all, though, want to thank the Midland Cultural Centre for making the facility available to us this evening. That's a very generous thing for them to do, and certainly makes it more convenient for you to be in this great location. So thanks to the MCC. Let me tell you who these people are. These natives of Kenya that are on the stage right now. And I'll tell you a little bit about their background, although they'll tell you more later. But Kathy Tate, on my immediate left, is the president of the Midland Rotary Club, and you will learn of the role of the Rotary Club in this event. Ron Crane is a 50-year member of the Midland Rotary Club. Hank DeYoung is also a long-term member of the Rotary Club. Nancy Hargrave is the secretary of Life4Kids, the organization that supports the home that we visited. Gord Sedgwick is the sponsor of one of the boys at the home in Nairobi. And Randy Hargrave is, most importantly, the husband of Nancy, but also a very active community volunteer and active in his own way through the Lions Club in international pursuits. Sydney and Jason and Kyle Wilson are related to one another by birth. Sydney and Kyle accompanied us on the trip and made it a very special time. Jason Wilson is the immediate past president of the Midland Rotary Club. So that's the gang. Let me tell you very briefly about the home, how it came about, and our interest in it. So about probably 16 years ago now, a woman named Emily Sorensen, who is from this area, went to Kenya on a short mission trip. While there, met some boys and started a feeding program. And she was so touched by that experience that when she came home, she felt that she had to do something for these boys, so she returned to Kenya and continued her feeding program. It grew into a home, and what started as a small program now has 26 boys living in a home with full-time staff. 3 boys over the age of 18 who are continuing their late secondary school education, and 4 more boys who are in post-secondary education. So these boys are all doing well, and we're going to tell you about them, but you have to know, by way of background, that they all came from a slum. Some of them, when they came into this home, had never had a roof over their head. None of them had been to school. Some of them had never eaten clean food. We'll show you some of the places that they came from. But they now are being raised in a home like a family, and that's the home that we visited. So let us begin by, so that's the group there in Kenya, along with some of the staff members who you will meet this evening. And that is the entire family of the Life4Kids boys and staff. And let's get some background information. Let's begin by asking you, Kathy, how this trip came about.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, so over the years, the club has been involved in several international and friendship projects. We hadn't done one in about 7 years. Post-COVID, and given we, Rotary, have been a financial supporter of Life4Kids for 5 years. Never having been there physically, the time was right. Rotary has always had an international outlook. And the name of tonight's program, From Compassion to Action, well, this was our Compassionate and Action project. So why not now? How can we help them? That's how it came about.
Great. Ron, let's hear from you. You're a member of the Rotary Club, recently celebrated 50 years as a Rotarian. Why did you want to go to Kenya?
I wish you hadn't said 50 because I was trying to pretend I was younger. Yes, I've been a member of Rotary in Toronto and then up here for 50 years. And I've been involved in all kinds of projects over that period of time, including international projects. But I've never been on a mission. And when this started to develop and there were plannings, I thought, well, I can't wait another 50 years. So maybe I should go on board with this. And I talked to my family about it, and my wife, my kids, my grandkids universally said, you should go. Not sure why they wanted me to leave the country, but I decided to.
Thanks very much. Can I ask each of you to put the microphone really close to your mouth? Nancy, you're the secretary and a director of Life4Kids. What caused you to want to see the home?
As a board member and secretary, I am very interested in the Life4Kids, of course. So I wanted to see it in person. Plus, I wanted to see the new home that Life4Kids Canada had purchased, and I wanted to meet the boys in person.
And Gord, you're a sponsor, so you sort of come to this from a little different perspective. What was your interest in going to Kenya?
Well, having traveled around the world and spending a lot of time in some third world places, and actually having spent some time in a refugee camp during those travels, I really realized the disparity between first world and the third world. And Alicia and I, my wife, have sponsored a child through World Vision before. When this opportunity came around, we thought this was more local, no overhead costs. We could actually meet the person who we were sponsoring and meet the boys, and that's why we wanted to go and to see what it was all about.
Great, thank you. Now, you may have heard me say that there were 11 of us went, and if you're diligent, you counted 10 people on the stage. So the 11th person is not here because she is traveling. Terry Brophy was the 11th person, and Terry is a travel agent, and Terry did all of the arrangements for us to organize the trip. And speaking of arranging, Hank, can you tell us about some of the preparations for going away?
Well, we had a number of meetings to discuss
Right up close to your mouth.
Sorry.
Everybody, yeah.
We had a number of meetings to discuss our travel plans, which consisted of figuring out what documentations we needed, such as visas, the inoculations and medications we needed to take for the diseases that we might meet, which are a bunch. The currency we would require, Kenyan shillings, which turned into a bit of an adventure. And last but not least, the rules regarding the importation of used clothing we were going to bring for the boys.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about then our arrival in Kenya. Gord, tell us about the anticipation. Keep that mic really close to your mouth and tell us about the anticipation of getting to the home.
So, first of all, it's a day-and-a-half flight from, Toronto to Nairobi. Having arrived there, we had no idea really where we were going. We didn't know how far the home was from the hotel we were at. I actually Googled it before I came, and it was 27 kilometers away. It took about an hour to get there. The first 20 kilometers we traveled in about 20 minutes. The next 5 kilometers took another 20 minutes, and the last 2 kilometers took another 20 minutes. And you can imagine, we went from a highway to really rough, rutted roads to really rough, rutted roads as we were going along. We passed, sort of scrubby area. There were estate lots signs on the side of the road, but there were lots of houses that were sort of 75 to 90% complete, but basically abandoned. So it was an interesting area where we were going to. We almost got stuck in the ditch trying to get in there. So we really didn't know where we were going or what we were getting into, and I think we were pleasantly surprised when we arrived.
So Jason, tell us about that actual arrival, and we'll put a picture up here to help tell the story, and it's up in front of you there as well.
Yeah, so it was quite a sight to see. We pulled up, before we even got to the gate, they all came running out. They were waving these flags, both Kenyan and Canadian flags, and all just super happy, cheering and singing and dancing, and they sort of swarmed us as we got off, and like where everyone was sort of all around us, and they just seemed genuinely happy to see us, happy that we were there. They love having visitors, and so we felt very special, that's for sure.
Sydney, can you tell us what your impression was when you arrived?
My impression was I was very filled with excitement, but also a bit of fear because I didn't know where to look because so much was happening. But I was really happy to receive the Canadian and Kenyan flags, and I felt very, very welcomed.
Great, thank you. And Kyle, can I ask you, what was your first impression of the boys on that very first day?
Yeah, it was also very surprising how happy they were, and their singing was very welcoming and good. I felt kind of, nervous because I never met them, but then I kind of got out and met them, and they were very nice, and I had a lot of fun.
Now, it looks like a very peaceful scene, doesn't it? Oh, we have volume there, Glenn? Well, you're being saved from the noise, because this is loud. But anyway, there they are. One of the things that the group did was to take some clothing for the boys. Jason, can you tell us how that got started?
Yeah, so we put out a call out to the community on our social media and our friends, and we collected a whole bunch of clothes and lots of different items, and we packed suitcases full of all these items, and so we all took extra baggage with us with the intention of leaving suitcases there, but we had a whole bunch of items, and I think someone else is going to talk about what those items are.
Great. Maybe, Ron, you can tell us what kinds of items we took.
Well, we took 11 extra large suitcases with us. And they were filled with T-shirts, shoes, backpacks, and out of those T-shirts, there was a surprising number of Tim's T-shirts and Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm sure they've never had a double-double or a Timbit in their life, and maybe they'll get that pleasure. And I sure hope they don't search the computer that they now have and find out the record of the Leafs.
Kyle, can you tell us about the whole process of unpacking and who got what?
Yeah, so we set out all the we sorted it in all the sizes, and we put them in assigned suitcases so we knew what sizes were which. And we all lined them up on one wall, and all the kids lined up, and each of them got one pair of shorts and one T-shirt, and then they would go to the back of the line and do it again until there was not much left. So there was a lot of looking through things, seeing if it was putting it up against them and seeing if it fit them, and they seemed super happy the whole time.
What about backpacks, Kyle? Didn't they get backpacks too?
Yeah, I think some of them just kind of took them, and we weren't really handing those out.
Okay. Sydney, what was the reaction of the boys to this Christmas in November?
Their reactions, they all seemed really happy and excited to get all the new clothes that they could wear. A lot of them were fighting over sunglasses and cleats. And they were super excited about all of the soccer stuff because in Kenya, I think they really like soccer. So they were fighting over some of the jerseys that we had. And
Hello? What was it? Oh. Okay, we solved that mystery. In the words of Kathy, it was just Ron. Yeah. One of the things that we did, and it was a bit of a surprise to us, was a tree planting ceremony. I wonder, Nancy, if you can tell us both the significance of that and what your impression was of that event. I'll help you with a picture.
Yes, that's me planting the first tree. So there was 3 commemorative trees planted, and I planted the one on behalf of Life4Kids Canada, which commemorated our visit and the purchase of the new home by Life4Kids Canada. And the next tree was planted by Fred on behalf of Rotary, and then a 3rd tree was planted by Inger of Norway. She was there, and that was in honor of Life4Kids Norway's, that board, their support. And the staff and the boys made it quite a ceremony. You can see they're wearing their costumes, like a traditional costume, all the boys. And it was a really prominent event, and they were very grateful. I think that's what it symbolized to them, their gratitude for us being there in person.
Thank you. That first night, what kind of trees? Little trees, but we hope they'll get big.
Mine was some sort of pine.
Yeah.
They didn't tell us what they were.
Norwegian pine, is that what somebody said? Norfolk pine.
Okay, Norfolk
Okay.
pine.
There we go. Now, the first night we arrived, they treated us to a barbecue dinner. And there was an element to the dinner that was a little unusual for us as Canadians. And Nancy, I'm going to come back to you and ask you, what was unusual about the dinner?
Well, it was, I'll tell you the story. The CEO, Jane, explained that one of our tasks that day was to slaughter the goat. My hands flew to my face when she told me that, and I explained to her about my volunteer work with the Ontario SPCA. I've done that for most of my life, so she could see I was shocked. So by my reaction, she understood there was a cultural divide on food preparation. So I was outside, this beautiful white goat was tethered in the yard, and once I saw it, I couldn't stay outside. I went back inside and was happy to sort clothes with Kyle and Sydney, and then the staff altered the slaughter. They didn't let any of the visitors see it. So they changed their behavior because of my reaction.
What we did see, though, was what ended up on the barbecue. If you look closely, you will see chicken feet and the raw goat. Now, that's Nancy's reaction. Randy, you have a background in the food industry. What was your reaction?
Yes, I do. My reaction was we were going to eat very fresh meat that night because they had no qualms about slaughtering the goat and chickens that afternoon. As Nancy said, they did do it discreetly, so we didn't see it. The barbecue was a very big deal for them. It was a very special occasion, and it was unusual for them to eat outside at nighttime.
Yeah. Now, they also entertained us that evening. And this was a really recurring and significant part of our trip. Every time we were with the boys, they'd have a new song or a new dance or something. So I'd love to get some impressions of that. And Sydney, I'm going to ask you first. What did you make of the entertainment that we saw?
It was really amazing to see how unafraid all of the boys were to dance and sing in front of us. And their voices and dancing was beautiful, and it was great to see a new culture of dance and entertainment.
Thank you. Kyle, what was your reaction?
Yeah, so sometimes it would just like come out of nowhere and they would just like get up, start dancing around, and it was just like every time you would see them get up, you were like, oh, and then they would do it and you're like, oh yeah, and then you just have so much fun with them. They would like bring you in, you would dance with them. It would always make you excited.
I don't know whether this will work, but, no volume, but this happened all the time. It just spontaneously, they would break out in dance and song and carry on. Kathy, what was your reaction?
Yeah, this was amazing. I would call dancing and singing their superpowers. These kids had rhythm, they'd sing, they were coordinated. We're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, how did they put this together? But you know what? They had this sense of joy on their faces. They came alive when they danced and when they sang. So the rest of us did our job. You know, we clapped. Some of us joined in with the dancing. And Kyle was in there. I think they dragged Kyle into every dance they possibly could. But there was such a sense of pride. And it was a great experience for us. So as Fred said, you know, we'd have entertainment 2, maybe 3 times a day. I mean, this is extraordinary.
Now, I think this video is telling in another way, and that is, at this point in the dance, all the staff are in front of the kids, okay? Like, the staff danced and sang, and they were right in there with the kids, and I thought this was amusing, because you can't even see the kids. The staff are all in front of them in this one. Well, we mentioned, I think it was Sydney mentioned the interest in what they call football, soccer, and when we got there, I think, Kyle, did they have one soccer ball? And the one soccer ball was up on a barbed wire about 18 feet in the air. So there probably wasn't anything that we provided to them that was more meaningful to them than the soccer balls. And Jason, maybe you can tell a little about the presentation.
So just lead up to that, Kyle actually had the idea to bring these soccer balls over, not even knowing that they had issues with their soccer balls. So it was quite convenient that we did bring them over, and the kids blew them up in secret, and then decided on the time that they were going to come and present it to the boys at the campfire.
Kyle, what did the boys think of it?
Yeah, immediately as soon as they saw them, they kind of like started running over and just grabbing them out of the bag. They seemed so excited because they had like one soccer ball and it was like so flat because the field that they play on is just 2 sticks with a string in the middle, and there's like spiky bushes and so like up and down everywhere.
Well, thank you for that idea. That was a great idea. Now, I want to talk, or have one of you talk about food at the home, and maybe just get a little more impression of the meals that we served. So, Randy, you're a foodie. What do you think of the food?
Well, the cook, she has a weekly rotation of meals she serves. All the meals are homemade. There's no processed food. They do serve a lot of staples like rice and cabbage, and they serve a bread like an Indian bread substance called chapati. So the food is balanced, nutritional, calorie-laden. But I found it very bland, but they did serve very generous portions.
And the boys ate very generous portions. Gord, what was your reaction to the food?
I would just echo what Randy said. The only thing I'd add is the fact that there were little specks of meat in some of the soups and things, and yeah, chewy, I would say. I mean, like the goats and the chicken and the barbecue, they don't let food sit for, or at least meat sit for 24 hours like we are accustomed to in North America. So it's very chewy.
One of the purposes for which we went had to do with projects. Kathy, can you tell us about the projects and how they were funded?
Yeah, so in the planning of this, we had to raise dollars, but we did have dollars in an international bucket. Thank you, Jerry, our treasurer, for helping us navigate this. when we realized what projects we were going to do, so we agreed on a library, computer lab complete with computers, and a garden. We needed about $10,000. We had $5,000 from Rotary, and then we applied for a great grant from our district, Rotary District. They ended up giving us matching our $5,000, which was one of the largest matching grants that they had ever given. So when we look at it, we ended up with more than 10,000. We had some generous donations from friends in Rotary, friends associated with Rotary, and family members. So we were able to accomplish library, computer lab with computers, and a garden, and we'll talk about the garden later.
Well, let's talk about the library computer lab first. And Jason, you were kind of the foreman, at least of our group. Tell us about what was done.
So all the materials were purchased ahead of time in Kenya, and they organized the designer, and someone helped to actually build everything. So there was someone there to help organize us with to contact the designer, and so we helped him build everything. He had sort of kept calling the designer to make sure that we knew what was going on and how to do everything, and we just sort of helped as we went along. One day we had no power, so there was a bit of some difficulties with that, but he still had some of the manual tools and got through all the work, and they purchased all the computers as well, locally as well, through the funds that we sent, and that went towards the actual computer lab. So we spent a couple days at least helping to build that.
Hank, tell us about the finished library product.
Well, you can see the finished library on the screen. And when we arrived, there was a pile of assorted boards on the floor, no instructions whatsoever. But there was a very good carpenter on site, albeit he had a limited set of tools. He built those 4 shelves out of the pile of assorted boards with really no detailed design other than what came on a cell phone. Our input was really very limited, consisting mainly of watching him work.
And Jason, the finished computer lab, what was in it?
So there were 5 workstations that ended up being completed. We helped set up the computers on the final day that we were there, and then the oldest boys got to try out the computers first, and it was amazing because this was like so impactful for them because they don't have computers in school. They haven't accessed computers at all. This was like their first time interacting with computers, and so we showed them Google Maps. We showed them where Midland was, and zoomed out and zoomed into where Nairobi was, and showed them sort of where we were and where we traveled in the world, and to show them how to use it. Like I would try to explain things of like, click this and scroll that, and they didn't have any idea what I was talking about. I had to show, like, put your finger on this button on the mouse, and this is called clicking, and this wheel here is called, this is a scroll wheel, and you can scroll to zoom in and out. So that it was a fresh new experience, and it was, I'm sure, mind-blowing for them to be able to just see a map on the screen and be able to zoom right in and zoom right out and see the whole world. So yeah, definitely huge, impactful thing for the boys.
And this is a picture that our team may not have seen because it just arrived, but this is the older boys in there at the table, which the team also built, and you'll see the computer stations at the back of the picture. I do ask what the one kid is doing looking out the window, but he's a kid. Well, the Garden of Love, that was the other project, and Kathy, tell us about the preparation for that.
Okay, you know the saying, let me count the ways? This essentially became a dirt moving party. We had 3.5 shovels, a couple of rakes, a mountain of dirt that would be almost as high as this ceiling. They say gardening is therapeutic, And when we had almost every little boy and big boy, all of our team chip in, they were moving wheelbarrows around the place. It was, how would I say, controlled chaos. It was almost like everyone was possessed. We had to move this mountain of dirt that you see. We thought it would take 2 days. It took 1 day and a bit. We had close to 30 people involved, including the 4-year-olds. And we had one of our members who became obsessed with a pickaxe, who will go unnamed, Gord. We had to build this garden on top of rock and gravel. And when you see the results, you will agree that a bit of magic took place. And it's when you have passion and a mission. So, this garden of love.
Well, let's hear from Gord, Mr. Pickaxe. Gord, what were the results of all of this?
Well, it was quite amazing when I first saw it. You can see the rocks around the border. Kathy and Terry were the supervisors and planners of the garden, and they said we needed rocks for a border and we were going to build a raised bed. Well, the rocks were very easy to find. The ground, I was obsessed with getting down below the rock layer to finding some sort of subsoil, but I don't think I ever got it. But I did get the cement and larger rocks out of where we were planting the garden. And you know what? I think there may be another picture in here, but it's turned out to be very successful. I didn't realize how shallow a garden needs to be to grow.
There's garden in bloom. Well, these projects that we did were dedicated, and I'd like to ask Nancy if she would speak to the dedication of the library computer lab.
So we wanted to recognize that the funding was provided for the project, for the library, the computer lab, by Midland Rotary and Rotary District 7010. So that's what one of those plaques the boys are holding.
Right.
And then we wanted to dedicate the library in memory of Pastor Martin Giebel. He was a former director in the Life4Kids Canada. He tragically passed away in 2024. So that's what the Life4Kids plaque shows, and that's his picture. And then these plaques and Martin's picture are on the walls in the library now. Well, they put them up before we left. So again, very grateful the boys were for this.
And Kathy, the dedication of the garden.
Okay.
You need a mic.
Got it. We planted 20 plus trees, 40 plus vegetable plants with the help of the whole community. I was asked, what do you want to name the garden? And the first thing that popped into my head, and I want you to keep in mind, we had about 30 people working on this garden. It was the Garden of Love. It was such a communal project where everyone had a hand in it. The result was nothing short of magical. What's even more amazing is that they're harvesting vegetables after only 3.5 weeks. Where there was nothing but rock, gravel, and rubble, we as a community brought this yard to life. The testament is that the boys and the staff have a deep connection to it by the care they give it, and it's theirs now to nurture.
Thank you. One of the things that Nancy and I did when we were there was to meet with the staff. Because we're on the board of Life4Kids Canada, we were anxious to hear what the staff thought of where they worked and who they worked for. And Nancy, I wonder if you could maybe summarize that for us.
Sure, there's 12 staff, and most of them were at the meeting with Fred and I, and it was apparent to me that they are devoted to the boys. They work well together. They treat the boys as family, not as an institution. The boys are loved and cared for by each of them. My impressions are that it's well run. The staff and the CEO are all dedicated, and they're very proud of the home. And one of the social workers in the picture was a boy who was raised in the home. So he went to college, and now he works for the Life4Kids home. So he's a real success story.
He's the boy in the sunglasses, or the man in the sunglasses in the back row. Well, speaking of his background, we visited a slum, and Gordon, maybe we could begin talking about this by asking you about, just describe the visit, describe the slum.
So what I found out during the trip was that probably 75% of the population of Nairobi, which is 8 million, live in some form of poverty, and I'm not too sure what portion would be considered to be at the slum level, but it's certainly very large. It's supposedly the largest slum in Africa. It was very hard to describe. I mean, most of the people are living in corrugated galvanized steel huts that range in size from maybe 6 by 6 to 10 by 10, dirt floors, limited furniture, limited cooking. There's no running water. Sewage is running through the streets, or alleyways, I guess. It's pretty despicable. People are just scavenging through the garbage dumps that they're sitting on. One slum that we visited, apparently there was a huge monsoon rain in the spring, and it had been, I think it probably took out thousands of these hovels along the river, and there was nothing but garbage, that we were walking on top of after. And there's lots of kids and just people running around not knowing, not sure where they actually lived in the slum.
Nancy, what's the connection between this slum and Life4Kids?
Well, the slum is where the boys are found by Jane, the CEO. These boys are abandoned or homeless. Their families can't care for them if they have a family. And my overall impression was that the slum is not a hopeful place for those that have to stay there. And just to point out in the pictures, it's just us that went and the staff. We didn't take, those boys in the pictures would be people who live there. We didn't take boys from the home back there on that day.
And this is where some of them would find their food. Some of them would actually live on the edge of that. And in fact, one of the people we met, Ron, was a lady who lived on the edge of the dump. Tell us about her and her relationship to Life4Kids.
Well, as was indicated, not all these kids are orphans. They are sometimes just abandoned by their family who can't afford. And we were invited to a grandmother of one of the boys at the home to see her, and she referred to it as a home. And as Gord said, these are dirt floor made from other people's garbage, no water, no sanitary facilities, no electricity. She showed us her bed, which was perhaps the cleanest thing she found someday in the dump. And what she did emphasize was she was so thankful that her grandson was being looked after, was in the home, and now had a future.
Just to add a little to that, if I may, today I was told that her grandson started junior high school yesterday. Yeah. Well, we met other people there. Jason, can you tell us about the little lady that Jane has her arm around?
Mm-hmm. So we saw where she was living as well, and she was very emotional when we were there. She had to give up her son, I guess. No father, and I guess I think there was probably alcohol involved, and she was not doing well, and her son would have suffered if he was to stay with her. And so Life4Kids was able to give him a home, and she was very grateful, almost like a slight bit of shame, I guess, of having to do that, but very grateful, emotional that we were there, and yeah, it was an emotional experience for sure.
And very grateful that she knew her son was being cared for. We had to be cautious, obviously, in terms of the pictures we took, but when we were traveling, I took a video of a street that is just outside the slum, but it will show you what the frenzy of activity is like. You see the shops along here are all just tin, wood frame, and everybody's trying to make a living with whatever they can. That would make a superior home, the drywall that guy's carrying. Randy, one of the things that touched us was the feeding line. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, some of the staff from the Life4Kids home brought some food, some bread, and some milk. So, and they were handing it out to the children in the slums. So, impressions I got were, this happens a lot because the boys, it was mostly boys at the beginning. They lined up perfectly. There was no shoving, no shouting, no butting in. Then, by word of mouth, hundreds, well, maybe not hundreds, but maybe 50 or 60, 70 kids showed up just all by word of mouth for this food. And the staff went through it really quickly. And I got the impression the kids, they were quite pleased, thankful for what they got, which was 3 slices of bread and a small carton of milk. And I learned that that was probably the only food they were going to eat for that day.
Life4Kids has brought 3 new boys into the home since we visited. And Nancy, you might, if I can ask you to do this, sort of describe the circumstances in which those boys were living before they were brought into the home.
The day we were there in November, Jane identified 2 of these boys that have been brought into the home now. That's the boy that's under her left arm. That's one of them. I got the impression that perhaps people recognize Jane when she shows up in the slum and they approach her. But she knew about this boy as soon as we were there. And he's a 4-year-old. And the others that came in were 4 as well. But yeah, they know Jane, and I bet just seeing white people come in brings attention. But these are abandoned boys, and there he is, and I'm grateful that we were able to bring him to the home.
Hank, this is a picture of the 3 4-year-olds that we brought in. Hank, you have kindly offered to sponsor one of the boys. I just wonder what's your reaction to sponsorship?
Well, in 2014, my wife and I were in a different part of Kenya in Mombasa on a tourist bus when we stopped, and I saw a small boy, maybe about 4 or 5 years old, walk out one of the slum houses next to our bus. He and I made contact through the window, eye contact, and my thought was, you poor kid, what will become of you? I couldn't help that boy then, but now we're able to help these boys, and I'm glad that we are now sponsoring one of the boys. His name is Arnold, and I'm not sure. I think he's the kid in the red. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's Arnold.
Well, from the slums, the next day, we went to a worship service. And maybe, Randy, I'll ask you if you will describe that experience?
It's different from our church services here. It started at 9 a.m. and it lasted until 1 p.m. So it was a long service of music, prayer, and the message. Although it was very repetitive. One song that I'm familiar with is 3 minutes, but they made it into over a 10-minute song. But it was well attended. People arrived at different times and stayed, and the church was full by the end of the service.
Ron, your impression of the service?
I don't do impressions. Well, to tell you the truth, I saw this building from the outside, would look pretty plain. When I got inside, I didn't know whether I was in a church or a nightclub. As you can see, there was all kinds of flashing lights and psychedelic paintings on the back, and there was I'll call them a rock group, who were wearing matching, very loud costumes. But the final impression, if I can do it, is that the church was full at the end of 3 years, or 3 hours. It just seemed like 3 years. And everybody was happy. They were smiling, and a lot of them stuck around to say hello to us and give us a smile.
One of the things we did was to entertain the boys. Hank, can you tell us about what we did?
Well, in the middle of Nairobi is the Nairobi National Park, which has lions, rhinos, and other large animals roaming free in the park. It's quite interesting. This is a park that is in the middle of the city, so you can go through and you can see all these wild animals, and at the same time you can see skyscrapers. We got in special open-air vehicles and we toured the park. And then later that same day, the boys in our group went to a water park where we had lunch, and the boys went swimming, which was a rare treat for them.
Thank you. So, Kyle, Sydney, let's ask you, what was your impression of the animals?
There were so many new animals that I'd never seen in the wild before. Like, we saw a lioness that came very close to our vehicle, and we also saw 2 rhinos. It was a great experience to see them so close up, and yeah. The animals also just didn't seem to care that we were there, and they just kept kind of going on with their day like nothing was happening, which I found kind of surprising.
And let's talk about the water park. First of all, I guess we went for a lunch there, Kyle, and then to what they called the water park. What was your impression of that?
Yeah, so this is us. As soon as we got there, they all went to the back and we had some food, and they were like serving it out at the very back that you can see in the back of the slide. And everybody was happy. Another very nice treat for them. And then we went to the pool, and yeah, one of the kids said, yeah, it was the best day of the year for them. It was like they were all on one side of the pool with one ball, and they were just hitting it around and having fun.
And they call this a water park, and we have our own impression of a water park, but you see the entire water park there. It's a little pool and a big pool. Well, let's talk about education, because that's really important to Life4Kids and very important to the future of Africa. So, Jason, we visited the school. What was your impression?
I was quite impressed. The kids and I walked all the way up. You could see how many floors it is. We walked all the way up on a bunch of the floors, peering into the classrooms, and there were desks, like sort of like ratty old desks, I would say, but desks nonetheless, and blackboard. They were out for the summer, I guess. So on one of the blackboards, there was like a big letters, "Go home," and there's like letters and animals on the walls, and like typical things that you would expect from a school. So I was really quite impressed with how it all looked, and the kids obviously, like from what we saw of the boys, they're quite quite smart. Like they are learning good stuff. Their English is quite good. So yeah, I'm very impressed with the education system.
I'll just add a couple of things, because I had the opportunity to speak with the chairman of the school board and with the administrator of the school and with one of the teachers, and they are totally devoted to what they're doing, but of significance to us, they love the little kids from Life4Kids, and the chair said that, and this sounds strange, but this is the way he said it. He said, you'd never know that they started their lives in the slum. That and some of these little guys, there's one little boy who's 7 or 8 who reads as well as anyone in this room. And he was, we thought when we brought him in that he would not be able to do well in school because he had been smashed in the head by a big boy and still has a big dent in his head. He, after 3 months in school, the teachers reported that he was the smartest kid that they'd ever dealt with, and that they thought he was a genius. And this little boy's just excelling. He could read and write and do arithmetic after 3 months in school. Gord, you had an experience with the little boys and their report cards.
So we arrived at the end of their school term. It was November. I think they had a couple months off during that winter break. And about 3 days into it, we'd got to know these kids a little bit anyway. They'd become more comfortable with us being there. And then their workbooks and report cards arrived. Well, a great number of them wanted to show off how well they had done to us who were sitting in the room. And there were several of them who just sat down beside it, and really all they wanted was a pat in the back and say, great job. You know, some of the marks were sort of in the 70s, but, you know, several of them were in the 90s, and one boy was extremely, we all remember him. He had 98s and 100 on everything he was showing us, and he was so proud of what he had done. And, I mean, we felt like father or mother figures to these kids.
We mentioned entertainment, but I do have one other quick little video, and then I'll ask for some reflections. But this is a dance, and what's amusing about this is that the fellow in front is leading, but he goes left and the others go right, and then they all get into sync. The boy in black was actually in the back row when I started to videotape this, and he was so appalled by the lack of coordination of his brothers that he went to the front, turned around and said, this way, and got them all coordinated. It's fun to see the boys interact. In terms of this, the last day, Randy, they put on a little show for us. Can you tell us about that, the recitations and so forth that they did?
Yes, so they did entertainment like that for us, the dancing and such by the boys and the staff. The staff would, as mentioned earlier, would join in comfortably, and both the staff and the boys were comfortable with each other's participation. One thing that struck me, the female staff once in a while would break out in a high-pitched vocalization, which is called ululating. It's a Kenya celebration tradition, right? So it's really high pitched. I've tried to imitate it, and no way, it's not right.
Go ahead, try.
No. And then the boys gave some speeches. It was memorized, and they all did really well. Some of them were nervous, but they all were able to finish, and the older boys more comfortable speaking in front of strangers, right? So they did really well with their speeches.
Kathy, what was your reaction to that final day's entertainment?
Remember, I talked about superpower. So I want you to picture this. We had one 8-year-old, the genius. He created a poem about the importance of education. It lasted for maybe 2 minutes. Absolutely wrote We're sitting there stunned. He had no notes, like we're all using notes. He had no notes. He had rhythm. It was almost lyrical, the way he presented this poem. Then we had a 9-year-old. He stood up and recited a poem in perfect French. Again, we're sitting there and we are blown away. Some of us clapped, some of us had tears in our eyes, but I'll tell you, we were so inspired by their talent and their exuberance. It's one of those life moments you won't forget.
Thank you. Well, we'll wrap up now. What I'd like to do is just ask a few of the group for their impressions of the whole experience, and from their own unique perspective, and then we'll open it up to questions. So please think of some questions to ask, whether it's something that arises from what we've said, or whether it's something that you think we should have talked about that we didn't. So, Kathy, let's go back to you for a moment, and from a Rotary perspective, what was your impression of our time in Africa?
You know, this was a project of consequence. This was a mission of compassion, and it encapsulated all of what Rotary stands for: service above self. From a Rotary perspective, it gave hope and courage to a small group of African boys who were rescued and cared for. The joy that we witnessed from all of these boys and the staff will be etched in our minds forever. Our impact was palpable and real. It's vitally important for us to understand that impact on an international basis, how transformative it can be. Given the success of the mission and the intimacy we experience with the boys and staff, I have no doubt we'll return. One of my favorite quotes from Margaret Mead is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." I do want to add one other note. I want to thank Fred Hacker for introducing us to such an inspiring organization, and one that we now have a true attachment to. Fred, it's gratifying that you have dedicated your heart, your time, and effort for these group of boys to prosper. They'll make a difference in the world, and we're fortunate to be part of it.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks very much. Nancy, from the Life4Kids perspective, tell us about the week.
Well, my reflection is that it was very heartwarming for me to see the direct impact of our donations to help these boys thrive. It appeared pretty much a straight line. Money helps these boys thrive. And the reality is, if we didn't send the money, then some of these boys could be dead. It's just that obvious. And I would summarize by saying the trip was just so worthwhile and affirming that we are making a difference.
Thank you so much. Gord, you went as a non-Rotarian, not somebody on the board, but as somebody who sponsors one of the boys, and we do have some other sponsors here this evening. Share with us and them what it was like to go there from a sponsor's perspective.
I think the Life4Kids story is an amazing story. It's, it's a small grassroots organization that started really in this local area. It's grown. The story hasn't come out tonight. The fact that about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, the home that the boys were living in, which was a rented home, they were evicted from the home, and we had to replace the home. And Fred primarily, and a lot of others, raised enough funds to be able to buy a home for the kids. And the home actually will house 44 boys now. So we're at 26. It's growing. I mean, it's a small kick in the bucket, you know, of the number of boys and kids that are living homeless in the slums there. But for a relatively small cost, we're making a huge difference. And it was really rewarding to go see it in person.
Thanks, Gord. Hank, I wonder if you can tell us from your own personal perspective what impact this had on you.
Well, the gratitude and happiness that these boys expressed simply because of the fact that we were there to meet them and to show them support will stay with me forever. It was truly one of the most emotional and memorable experiences of my life. When we first drove up, and they opened the gates and the boys all came rushing out, I started to cry. And that's not something that I've done a lot of. So that's how it hit me.
Thanks, Hank. Thank you. Sydney, not every 12, now 13-year-old gets to do something like this. What was your reaction?
My reaction was, well, it was great to see that their lives were being transformed from living in the slums to being able to grow up and be able to have maybe an impact on the world. But I also took home how grateful I am to be able to live in Canada, and yeah.
Thank you. Kyle, not every 10-year-old gets to go to Kenya either. What are your reflections?
Yeah, every time I think of them, I always wonder how they live in those conditions and how happy they are living in those conditions and how lucky we have it here. Like, if I was at my house just sitting down, some of them are in the slums just like working, trying to get that last little bit of food just so they can survive. And I just am so grateful that I get to live in this part of the world.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, it's your turn now. We would be delighted to entertain any questions that you might have. If you raise your hand. Yes.
I have a question. First of all, thank you very much. The way our world is right now, it is so wonderful to hear something positive. This is I have a couple of three questions actually. When you mentioned the computers and electricity, are there solar panels involved or anything else aside from electricity?
That's a really interesting question because the power goes out all the time and there aren't any solar panels now. But one of the things that's on our wish list is to be able to provide solar power to the home. It's very expensive, but Jerry's at the back with a little box and any money that goes in it can. Question 2. Nancy, can you answer that?
I believe it's just the need, like those that are abandoned, if they truly don't have parents, a mother usually is who gives them up, or they just don't have somebody to look after them. They're abandoned. They're truly homeless, abandoned, living on the streets. So I would think Jane makes regular visits there? Fred would know for sure.
There are referrals from the local police to Life4Kids saying, you know, we found this kid 3 years old or 4 years old sleeping, you know, under a pile of garbage in the dump. Is there anything you can do? The children's charity government agency refers children to us. And this is something you might find shocking, but the tribal chiefs, and in Kenya, there still are tribal chiefs in geographic areas. The tribal chiefs try and take care of the members of their tribe and will refer kids to the home that they feel need help. Kathy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just briefly. When we were in the slums, and Jane, she sort of had this razor-like eye. And I said, "What are you looking at?" She said, "I'm going to choose a boy." And I said, "Well, how are you choosing that boy?" And she said, "I look for a little one that's isolated." And she had a knack for that. So isolation, they weren't with the other kids. They were on their own.
Yeah. Okay.
For the language, you mentioned, Kathy, about the French. Now, I did see on the board the English school. Do they all speak English? Or also their native language?
Who wants to answer that? Randy?
Yes, they all speak English. I was told the boys, well, now all the children, all the students in Kenya are taught English, and they get 1 hour of Swahili a week, and so the French must have been special class for that one boy, but their English is better than mine.
One of the things we learned that I didn't know when we went there is that they all have a tribal language. And the staff were telling us that they come from different tribes, so they each have languages different from one another. Swahili is the language that sort of unites the tribes, if you will. And so the little boys, when they come into the home, speak Swahili, perhaps also the tribal language, but they don't speak English. So the 3 little guys you saw did not speak English when they came into the home. But very quickly they do. Question here. One way to answer that question is to tell you that there are at least 200,000 little boys living homeless and abandoned. Some of them live if they get into homes like ours. But only 26, well, actually right now we're caring for about 34, 35 little boys. But there's another 200,000 out there that need help. Well, thank you for those comments, and I'll just make 2 quick comments, if I may, in response. One is Martin Giebel was on our board, and he really was the moral compass, the conscience of our board. He had a heart for these kids, and we tried to honor our memory of him by dedicating the library and computer lab in his memory, so that the little boys know his name now. They certainly never met him, but they know his name. The second thing is, part of the challenge that an organization like Life4Kids has is getting the story out. So we would love to enlist your help in doing that, to, get the story out there. We could have 40 boys in that home instead of 26 if we had the resources to do it. The home accommodates 40 boys, but we don't have the resources to do that. Question here.
Yes, but also from St. Mark's, and the boy that I think that we sponsored since we started with Martin was Samson. I don't know whether if anyone met Samson when you were there. I'd like to know a little bit more about him, if that's possible. And then a second question, the ones that graduate, give us some idea of where they end up. Are they becoming the politicians? Are they becoming, where do they go? Obviously, new people come in when those ones graduate. And just give us, did you find out what happens when they leave school?
Sure did. Who wants to talk about Samson? Nancy.
I had a bond with him. You've seen the pictures. There was 23 boys in the home, and they all have the same pretty much shaved haircut, and their skin's the same color, and there's not too much to distinguish the difference. So, you know, it was hard each day I'd memorize what the boys were wearing, and when they introduced their name, and then the next day they'd have a different outfit on, and I couldn't remember who they were. So I was trying my best, and by about the 6th day, Samson, I would ask Samson numerous days what his name was, and he'd tell me, it's Samson. And then the last day, he stands beside me and says, do you know my name today? And I thought, you've got to be Samson. So I have Samson memorized, and he's got this beautiful smile. Like I said, he was my favorite, and like Hank said, on the last day, I had to ask someone, take my picture with him. He's just adorable, and I was crying as well when we said goodbye, because I had formed just a love for all the boys. Like, they told us frequently that they loved us. And like I said, they only met us for 6 days, but they know what we represent. They are so grateful. All the time they repeated their gratitude, each boy, Samson included, but and they're all really great artists. They gave us each a card when we arrived and a card when we left, with art and wording. And we came home with 2 cards from Samson just randomly, but I treasure them because they're very good artists.
What else did they give us?
Yes, these bracelets. We're all wearing our this Kenyan bracelets with the flag of Canada, the flag of Kenya, and our names. And that was a funny story too, when we talked about all the dancing and how we got to participate. I love to dance, and one of the staff called me, Nancy, come up. The music was loud, and the accent, I thought she said, we need your help to dance. Okay, I'm up there dancing. And she said, no, we need your help with the names. They didn't know who to hand the bracelets out to because they didn't know who we were. They knew Fred and they knew me because we're on the board, but the rest of them, they didn't know their names yet when they were handing out the bracelets. I'm like, whatever, I'll just dance and name everybody. It was a lot of fun.
Now the second question was about graduates of the home. Who would like to speak to that? Gord?
One of the boys that we were most impressed with was a guy named Mike. And Mike was actually a police officer. And Mike actually escorted us into the slums because it really wouldn't have been safe for us to go in on our own. And he was very impressive. And there's another guy in the home named Sammy, who's a social worker now, and he grew up in the home as well. And just got very fond memories of both of those guys. Very, they've exceeded, well adjusted, yeah, just great guys. And they're role models for the other boys in the home. So they've seen some of these boys succeed, and I think that it's helping the whole thing out, the ecosystem that's growing there.
The CEO of Life4Kids, Jane Wasika, who you saw in a picture with her arm around the little boy who became one of the boys that came into the home, says that she is raising the future leaders of Africa. Yes?
When was Life4Kids founded and where?
Well, it was founded, oddly enough, in Nairobi, but it was founded by a woman from Midland named Emily Sorensen, who went on a mission in 2008, 2009, spent 2 months in Kenya, and while she was there, she's more than 6 feet tall and blonde and attractive, and some little boys started following her home for food, and so she started a feeding program where she fed them in the morning. They would come to her home for food, and she returned after a 2-month mission, but had a heart for what was going on and went back and founded this mission. One of the first employees in the home, and it really sort of organized as a home in about 2011, was Jane Wasika, who now is the CEO. She started working there as a volunteer and then was hired on as a senior staff person. Yes?
I'd like to thank you for this presentation. Obviously, it's part of the growth. I really appreciate what you're doing for the boys. Is there any effort being made for girls?
We get asked that question a lot, and let me explain. There is a reason why the home has boys and not girls. First of all, because boys were the first ones to be to go to Emily for feeding. But further to that, you have to understand the culture in Kenya. Little girls have value in Kenyan culture because they can help their mothers raise the younger children. They can be rented out as babysitters or homemakers. They can go into the homes of wealthy people and bring money home to the family. And they still have a dowry system there. So little girls, when they marry, their husband's family have to give something to the bride's family, a goat or a cow or cash or whatever it might be, depending on what strata of society they come from. Little boys don't have any value. And therefore, if somebody has to be kicked out of the home, it'll be a boy first. And that's why it's not that there aren't girls on the streets, but there are many, many, many more boys than girls. Anybody want to add anything? Kathy?
We had the privilege of being hosted by 3 Rotary Clubs in Nairobi. This is on our last day. And we spoke to the president of one of the clubs, and she said, "What about the girls?" And Terry and I looked at each other and we said, yes, like the girls maybe that's the next home. So if we can mobilize and get the Rotary Clubs in Nairobi interested, that indeed may be a next project.
Other questions? Yes, Ruth.
Is Emily still involved?
No, she's not. No.
But she really made a great difference by starting it.
Fabulous, fabulous.
When you first came to Knox and spoke, I said, oh, this is just marvelous.
Yeah,
I can't believe this.
yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Are there other homes? This is an organization that resides in Nairobi, but you mentioned Rotary, so are there other boards or other homes, or is this the only one?
So first of all, the Norway connection is that the funding for Life4Kids in Kenya comes approximately 75% from us, from Life4Kids Canada, and about 25% from an organization called Life4Kids Norway. So that's the connection there, and that was because Emily knew some people in Norway when she was starting the home and got some support from them. Are there other homes there? Yes, there are lots of homes run by various organizations, some run by international organizations like World Vision or that sort of thing. Others, smaller organizations like ours. What I think probably differentiates our home from some of the institutional ones is that it's run as a family. The boys really do feel like they're brothers to one another. The staff work 24-hour shifts for 4 straight days. So they are in the home day and night for 4 days. And then the second shift comes in, and it's a separate group of people, and they are in the home then for 24 hours for 4 days, and then they go back to their own families. So the boys have a bond with the staff members. The staff members are living right there. They're sleeping in the home with them. And one of the things that I noted, and maybe somebody else can comment on this, was how the big boys help raise the little boys. It's really interesting. The youngest boy when we were there was Kings, yes. Kings started to cry. The only time we saw any of the kids cry was this one little boy. And it wasn't one of the staff that went to him. One of the big boys got to him first and did what any good parent would do. It distracted him. He wanted a toy that somebody else had, so big boy came, gave him another toy, sat down and played with him, and he stopped crying. It's a family. Other questions? Yes?
Can you talk about progression and retention? How many make it to graduation, going off to school elsewhere? And are there cases of boys that don't make it?
Yes. Yeah, the question is retention. How many boys make it, how many don't? Bear in mind that the home has really only been kind of operational on anywhere near the level it is now for about 12 years. So a little boy who came in at 12 years ago is still only 17, okay? Some of the older boys didn't make it. Some of them didn't make it because they didn't apply themselves. Some of them didn't make it because they didn't have the aptitude. Some of them didn't make it because they came into the home too old. One of the things that we learned from the early experience was that if you bring a 10-year-old off the street, there's 10 years of behavior that has to be dealt with, trauma, abuse, and so forth. So the younger the boys are when they come in, the better their opportunity to make it. So, but yeah, some of the boys have made it. Some have gone into social work, into education. The police officer, I'll just add to what was said, and I think this was, Gord made this observation. The little kids adore Mike, the police officer. Like he's got a gun, he's a big deal. And it's not just the little boys, the whole community adores Mike. I mean, Mike is the best public relations thing we have going for us in Nairobi. Everybody knows him. I was out in the local community with him, and everybody's waving to him and talking to him, and he's a local hero. And everybody knows he's from Life4Kids. Another question? Yes, Ruth.
Is the home in a village? Is there a village around it, or is it kind of off away in a rural area?
It's in a rural area. Somebody, I guess Gord mentioned, or somebody mentioned that there are a lot of homes around it. Not many of them are occupied. One of my friends who's a developer said it's a failed subdivision. Now you might say that's a bad thing, but the community organization met last night and agreed to dedicate an empty field to our boys to play soccer in. So, the home is well received in the community it's in because they're big lots. Where they were in the core of Nairobi, in a really rough part of the city, it was dangerous for the boys, but they weren't well received either. The local community didn't like to have 20 some odd little boys running around. So the reason I say it's a failed community is because the home we bought for them, and you may have seen it in some of the pictures, if that home was in a subdivision in downtown, in one of the gated communities in Nairobi, we've been told it would be anywhere from $2 to $5 million to buy it. Because it's out in the country on the worst roads, and Gord underestimated how bad the roads are. They are worse than that. Because it's where it is, we bought that home for just a little over $200,000 Canadian. In Midland, that home would be, millions. In Toronto, it would be tens of millions. It's huge. 40 kids can live in it. Like it's a mini hotel. Question, yes.
But from some of the comments and questions that we've heard, it sounds like the whole room is full of potential sponsors and benefactors. You haven't shared some of the capital projects that you're trying to initiate or the cost of sponsorship.
I'm prepared to do that if people are interested in that. So maybe, and I'll do this quickly, but we really have sort of two funding sources. We have people who sponsor boys, and the sponsorship pays for their individual education, clothing, and their food allotment and their medication. It doesn't pay for the infrastructure. Sponsorship doesn't pay for the cost of the home, it doesn't pay for the cost of the staff, it doesn't pay for the cost of the vehicle, all these sorts of extra things. So if you say those two costs are roughly equal, the cost of the sponsorship is now $3,300 per annum, which is how much a month? $275? $275 a month. And some people share sponsorships with friends or people in a group. Other people just make donations, and some make significant donations. We also have sort of special purposes. So just to maybe perhaps what you're referring to, Armin, we'd love to have a solar system there so that when the power goes out every day, we don't have rotting food and darkness. So that's one thing. We'd like to be water independent. We right now are on a communal water system, which is okay, but we're dependent on the person who provides the water. Ideally, we'd have our own drilled well and be water independent. One of the projects that is sort of down the road somewhere is perhaps buying some land in the subdivision that we could put in larger gardens. Boys, as Kathy has said, have really taken to gardening. Like that's their garden, and they're out there weeding and watering. You probably saw the picture of the little guy watering the plants. So that's a good thing for them to learn. That kind of hands-on activity is a very healthy experience for the boys. So we'd like to buy some more land at some point to make the home food self-sufficient to the extent that fruits and vegetables could be grown there. They're now raising chickens and goats, so the more self-sufficient the home comes, the less the operating costs are. So those are some of the things. I'll just mention one of our sponsors who's in this room, but I won't embarrass him, bought 8 bikes for the boys for Christmas. So, and you'd say, well, how do you decide how you buy bikes? Well, Jane bought 2 bikes for kids 4 to 6, 2 bikes for kids 6 to 10, 2 bikes for kids 10 to 13, 2 bikes for kids 13 to... So you see these bikes that are sort of the size of the kids. That was a wonderful offer. Jane would like to have a music program for the boys. Some of the boys who aren't academically inclined are really, they got rhythm. Like these kids have music is just coming out their hearts, and so she'd love to have a room dedicated and instruments and, music and that sort of thing. So those are some of the things. So there are lots of things that can be done. If somebody wants to sponsor the cost of operating the vehicle that they use to run to and from town shopping and so forth, there are lots of projects that people could sponsor. And I would welcome your phone call if you want to have a suggestion made to you.
A commercial washing machine is on her wish list too.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, and a freezer. You speak to the freezer, Nancy. That's a great initiative.
My birthday was right after the trip, and so Facebook asked me while I was in Nairobi, did I want to do a Facebook fundraiser? And I've never done that before. Randy said it's really easy. He's done it before. So I did it and put the story out there with the comments of, what we were seeing every day, and it was a great success. We raised double the amount that we needed for a freezer, and Jane sent me a message and a picture this morning of 16 beautiful boys standing around a lovely freezer that's going into the kitchen. And I was just so pleased that I just had to put the word out, and I had so many generous friends, some are in the room, that helped me get the house a freezer. So I was just thrilled that that happened, and we'll use the excess funds for some of these wish list projects.
So we told you the program would be from 7:30 until 9. It's 9:04. So can I make this suggestion to you? We'll close the formal part now. If the group would stay behind, and if people want to come up and ask questions, we'll get your questions answered, but some of you may want to go out and shovel some snow.
Are you taking money tonight? And if so, who do we give?
Yes, we're taking money tonight. Our treasurer is sitting at the back there, and he has a little box, and he will be happy to receive any donations will be gratefully received. Thank you very much for raising that. Oh yeah, and for gifts, I don't know what the cutoff is. For gifts of $25 or more, we can get you a charitable tax receipt, and if you can give Jerry your information, or better still, write it out and give it to him with your money, or give him a check with your return address on it. We'll get you a tax receipt. On your seats, when you came in, there are some cards. Those cards have a QR code on them. If you click on that, you learn more about the organization, so feel free to take that with you. And if you do want more information, my contact information is on the website, which is on that card, oddly enough. Okay, well, thank you so much, and feel free to come up and ask questions, but we're really grateful you would come. Thank you. Thanks to Glenn in the booth for keeping us on track with audio and visual. Thanks, Glenn.